All right. We'll call to order the special meeting of the Ad Hoc Budget Committee on May the 23rd. And Michael, do we need an opening statement here?
Yes, sir. So this is a special meeting of the KPPA Ad Hoc Budget Committee. This meeting is being broadcast via video teleconference pursuant to Kentucky Revised Statute Section 61.826 and may be viewed by the public at the Kentucky Public Pensions Authority offices located at 1260 Louisville Road in Frankfort, Kentucky. It is also being broadcast to the public via Facebook. If you are speaking and are not appearing by video, please identify yourself before talking. In the event the video or audio broadcast is interrupted, we will attempt to reestablish a connection. If a connection cannot be reestablished within 30 minutes, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled to another date. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Sherry, the roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lane,
Here.
Mr. O'Mara. Thank you.
So we do not have a quorum, and as such, we will have our regular discussions and information flow from Mr. Lamb, but we cannot vote on anything, and any decisions or votes will take place in our next meeting.
I will also state that there was no public comment for today's meeting.
All right, and we will, I believe, pass on the minutes of the previous meeting.
Yes, sir.
So we will turn it over to Mr. Lamb. You're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you. Sure, I wanted to point out the agenda you were showing was last meeting's agenda. And I don't know if you have the new one that I provided the other day and if that got posted.
Yeah, all I have is the old one.
Mike, can you just tell us what it is?
I can, and I can share it. But let me, I think Sherry will need to allow me to share, which I think she can do. I'm already there. Okay. Is that showing?
Yes.
Okay. I will go down that agenda. But basically the number 6, the item there was just to remind you about the separation costs. We've been getting a lot of invoices from Denton's as well as from Bronco. So they're on their way in. We want to have all of them in by June 20th and paid. I will also finalize CEO costs after June 15th, and then I will show you the system specific costs in the next meeting as well. But those are more, they get charged to the systems specifically for this year, but then they're used in the hybrid percentage for next year. So those are just reminders. The main topic today was to review the draft investment budget. And what I would like to do with that is go ahead and share what Steve gave me, but also I modified it a little bit. So apologize for that, Steve, and let me go ahead and share that one. So Sherry confirmed that she has the right agenda. She just pulled up the wrong material. So we're on the right page. So Steve, what I did to the budget you provided me was I just put in the actuals and did a budget to actual comparison. So Steve gave me his budget for 23, 24, and 25. And the difference between 24 and 25 is what's being shown in this column here. And I think that we can go ahead and discuss this investment budget to the extent that we would like. Maybe if I turn it over to Steve to kind of maybe lead it for us, that would be great. And I can start wherever you want and I can drive wherever you want me to, Steve.
Sure, I think we can start with the consulting services. Um, we carry forward the two current asset class specific consultants that we have, as well as the general consultants, recognizing that the general consultants contract has an inflation component to it. So it does increase based on a measure of inflation that they calculate on an annual basis. So we just increased it by $50,000 for the year. And we've also included a new private markets consultant. This is all part of the larger initiative of the review of our consulting relationships that is ongoing. We anticipate that there's going to be a separation potentially between what we'll call a general consultant and the investment consultants. And the general consultants would provide information and services primarily to the boards and the investment committees, both the K and the C. And there is the potential that they may engage separate or they may engage the same. But most of those services would be provided directly to the boards, and those would things including the asset liability study and the asset allocation work, education work that they do for the boards and the investment committees. I would expect that there would be potential savings if we reduced the services contracted with a single general consultant that would potentially offset the cost of a new private markets consultant. And that would be, again, the distinction would be that's more of the investment consulting services that they would provide. And that project is ongoing. So in order to be conservative, I did include the full current, what we have contracted plus the inflation for the general consultant, which is Wilshire, and added a separate line item for a new consultant. Again, there's a little bit of uncertainty as to how those relationships may kind of evolve as we move forward based on both the project and decisions that will be made separately by each of the boards. I'll pause there if there's any questions on that. If not, we can move to the legal and auditing. And the legal and auditing, so all of the amounts were provided in consultation with Michael and legal. As we see, there's a fairly significant increase fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25 in the amount being budgeted. And that really is based on expectations of increased activity in a number of litigation cases. And I would note that for IMS, Michael is still working with them to kind of fine tune what the estimate will be or what the amount we should be budgeted for fiscal 25. And again, that's based on anticipation of increased activity. I carry forward the prior budget amount, and as we see for fiscal 24, we barely used any of the amount budgeted. But if we go back in time, I think that's been, if we go back to when there was more activity in that specific case that they work on, we've seen much closer to the budgeted amount. And in fact, there was a time when activity was higher that it was significantly higher. So I would expect that number to change in the final budget, but currently we're just using a carry forward number.
Just a question for someone who's not familiar with it. What is IMS doing for us? What services?
They're an expert witness, and Michael might go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, they are our expert witness in the Bay Hills litigation.
That's what I would have guessed, but thank you.
The only other thing I would,
as Steve said,
sorry.
with that case
Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I just want to, with that case scheduled for trial in the next fiscal year, that's why we anticipate that cost. And I'm trying to get a better estimate of that for this group. It's just taking a while for that to happen. So.
Thank you. The only other thing I would note under the legal and auditing services is we've consolidated on that second from the bottom line, the trustees and officers council. We had separated those, as we know, the insurance that was covering a lot of those costs has been exhausted. So those fees will be coming directly out of the trust now. I think there's before we had those individually listed. I think the decision was made that we were going to consolidate those for a number of reasons. So we'll see that as a single line item going forward. Obviously, a pretty significant increase in the amount budgeted there, given that the insurance that was paying those has been exhausted.
And if I may comment there, Steve, as well. As Steve said, part of that is just for purposes of looking at this, with the number of firms representing the trustees and officers, if we were to list them all out individually, this list would grow to, 12, 15 more lines for you all to look at. And then just to speak to the increased costs, as Steve said, the insurance policies have exhausted. We're now paying those out of the directly out of the trust, but additionally, in recent weeks, as publicly known in the court record, the motions to dismiss these cases have been denied by the court, and the cases are picking up steam. So we anticipate with that activity, our costs will increase as well. So just wanting to give a little clarity there about the anticipated cost there that's that we anticipate moving forward.
If there's no questions, we can move to the contractual services section. Most of these numbers, the modest adjustments based on activity for custodial services. Bloomberg contracts have an inflation element to them as well. Solovis, if we'll remember, we changed the data requirements in order for them to perform the performance reconciliation and validation that they are now performing on a monthly basis for us, and that adjustment resulted in an increase from the amount that we were originally paying. For Russell and S&P Global, those line items, there's still so for C, still needs to vote at the IC level. This is related to the large cap public equity internally managed portfolio and the cost of the S&P 500 index. The recommendation has been made by staff to move to a Russell index. S&P came to KPPA and wanted a pretty substantial increase in what they were charging for use of that index for that internally managed portfolio. So I've budgeted here assuming that the CIC approves that recommendation and is ratified by the board. If that does not occur, the S&P Global, the contract or the amount that the fee for on an annual basis would increase by about 125,000. It's AUM based, so there's some variability there, but would increase by 125,000 as opposed to being reduced by 27.5. And the Russell, that increase is full utilization of all the Russell indices and their components. So that still is to be determined based on the decision made by the CIC and the board. The only other thing I would note, is we've maintained the miscellaneous and new services and subscriptions section. As we've discussed both at IC and board meetings, we are reviewing a number of primarily external research providers, as well as some services and data utilities that we may try to implement in this fiscal year. And that line item would give us really probably anywhere from $3 to 4 of those types of services, depending on, you know, most of them are à la carte as far as the services they provide and how much, you know, they'll be a little dependent on staffing levels and what we have from a utilization standpoint. But I think that's a reasonable estimate of new services that we may engage over the next fiscal year.
The Bank of New York. That,
Yep.
the difference
Custody
there is
fees.
a quarterly billing issue.
Well, so we do have on the actual expenses. Yes, the actual expenses through, if we see through March 31st of fiscal 24, we've only paid 2 quarterly fees. So we're behind by 1, and that is more on a bills received from BNY. If we, it's about 600 to, again, there's a AUM based, a transaction based, so there's some variability in that, but we're running right about on an annualized basis about 2.6 million.
Okay.
And that's with BNY, that's not anticipating utilizing it. At one point, we thought we might utilize them for some additional services. I don't anticipate that going forward. We've looked at some other avenues for some of the reporting requirements or some of the packages that they provide. So the increase there is just, again, they have there's an AUM based, a transaction based, so there is some variability in that number.
Steve, Michael and Mike, I do have a couple of questions around the legal auditing portion of our budget. First question is, am I reading this correctly to say that if we took the IMS portion that we budgeted for 350 and essentially move that amount into the difference from what we had budgeted from 24, that would take our overall budget difference and make it very close to 2 million? Am I looking at that correctly? Yeah. So
Are you saying if I left this at 350 or if I took this out?
no. If you just move the 350 over to the difference from budget to budget, because in 24 we budgeted that amount for some reason, but the actual there was substantially less than that. And I understand the reasons that we think it's going to be higher this time. That aside, my primary question to you guys is, I believe we have to have some way, and this is laid out as well as it can be. We're showing that from 23, we had budgeted less than $2 million in legal and auditing expenses. And now in 25, 2 years later, it is substantially more than that. But it doesn't connect us at all with the movement for legal expenses that we see in the administrative budget. And I would say that there has to be a way for us to connect the legal expenses we see in the administrative budget and the legal expenses we see here, since they both come from the same source. And I'm not asking us to go back and look at the legal expenses from administration in this meeting, though I do think that it would make sense for us to think about how we can show a more comprehensive picture of the overall legal expenses than the two separate budgets might do.
So for example, Ed, we're budgeting 6.4 million right now in this draft investment budget. And in the admin budget, we currently have in draft legal expenses, 1.58 million. So you would like to be able to show that KPPA has in its budget $7 or $8 million worth of legal expenses, and maybe even track the actual in total somewhere to report at some point.
Yeah, correct. I think that's important from an overall transparency standpoint, that there be a place to see the total amount that's being spent on that expense as well as every other. And legal expenses, I think, are the only ones that transcend essentially both of these budgets.
I'm gonna ask, I know in closed sessions, Michael presents, I think, the total legal costs 3 different ways. I don't know if it includes all of the admin costs too, Michael. Is that those schedules you put together? Does it?
No, it doesn't break anything down by, whether, the specific cases that we are working on, and which, whether they come from the admin budget or the investment budget. That's something that I can ask Beth to work on, because I think, prior to developing this investment budget, a few years ago, everything was in the admin budget. And I think it would be, telling, to Ed's point, I think it would be telling to see, what that looks like as we've moved stuff across into the investment budget, what that has done to the legal expense that's included in still included in the admin budget, and how those things have increased, decreased, and what the balance has been over the past few years. So I think that's something we can do. We have that data. It's just a matter of running the right reports to get it in a presentable manner. So I think that's something we can do. With relative, I mean, it would take a little bit of work, but nothing that's overwhelming.
So Ed, if we bring something back to you to show going forward, that might be the next step for that.
Yeah, I think that's a great solution to what's not a problem, but just being able to see things clearly in one place.
Other questions for Steve on the investment budget? So it looks like there might be a couple numbers that change this S&P Global based on a C decision, and some clearer numbers on IMS for fiscal year 25 from legal. But as of right now, this stands at 12.2 million. It's about 2 million higher than it was last year budget wise. When we get to the point of the agenda where we discuss the next meetings we're going to have, I will let you know what I plan to do with this when it comes to approval from this committee as well as the KPPA committee or the KPPA board. Okay.
I don't have the agenda ahead of us, but or in front of me. Do we move on?
Sure, we can do that. The next item is to continue to review the draft 2025 admin budget, and there's 4 little items on there: personnel, legal, IT, and other. So I'll move to that if we're ready.
That sounds like a plan.
Let's get that up and running again. So let's talk about admin costs again. I apologize. I didn't get a chance to make this spreadsheet look pretty, but I think one of the items that Mr. O'Mara talked about last week or the last time we met was this additional headcount that the KPPA board approved, but we didn't necessarily get approved through the KBUD process. And we have reached out to the budget office to how do we begin that process, et cetera. There's going to be a worksheet that gets sent out to agencies to request additional headcount as well as dollars associated with that. We got a little chastisement from the budget office about not spending all of our budget in the last couple of years, and they kind of had an issue with giving us more money if we haven't spent all of our budget, which I think is a little, you know, we do a good job in analyzing and being frugal with this trustee money that's in the investments, and by not spending all that budget, I think that's a good thing. But we are at a point where we are close to our cap. We have some additional positions that are needed, and so we'll pursue that route. And originally, I had all of those costs. If you recall, as I walked through the spreadsheet, I had this 1,077,400 in this estimated position of salaries needed, and that drove down to this 20 million was higher. I've taken that out, and what I've done is if I added that $1 million into here, there's FICA that gets added, there's employer retirement costs that gets added, there's health insurance costs that get added. So the equivalent of that 1,077,000 $1,077,000 for 9 positions, with all of those benefits added, is 1.65 million. So what I've done is I've just added that right here. So in reality, our total budget, including those positions, is still 37 million, but I've identified that 1.6 million based on Mr. O'Mara's comment of maybe we don't put that in the individual line items until we get approval from the budget office to do that. And essentially what that does is it takes a piece of our reserve and specifies that this reserve is being held for additional positions, 1.6 million. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about first today, was how to present that to you going forward. Is this type of line item right below it, identifying it as unapproved budget office positions that we're working on. And once we get them, then it would be pretty easy to then incorporate them into this personnel budget because it's already incorporated into there. So let me first stop there and ask if there's any questions on that piece of the head count.
Mike, John Chilton here. I've got a couple of thoughts. One is that the actuaries, in computing the amount of with the annually required contribution, take into account administrative costs as well as future benefits. They reference the cost that we actually spend, not the amount we budget. So if we're under budget, it doesn't, that excess doesn't end up being built into the contribution rate. So essentially there's no cost to that to the employers. I think you ought to tell the budget office how that works with the actuaries, and they can write you a short note to explain that. But being under budget is not a big deal in terms of the cost associated with annual pension contributions. So the other thing is that for years, the legislature's trying to get a handle on the use of unbudgeted personnel costs that end up getting spent other places. And they have done various things to exercise control over that. And perhaps the most direct thing that they've done so far is to take the cap down for everybody. And so that there is no excess. So that's a real, that's a thing that occurs throughout state government. It doesn't just affect us only.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification on the actuarial costs. And then you're right. I see how the budget through the legislator gets approved and kind of driven by headcount. And yes, this was a headcount increase with associated dollars that we are requesting. And the reduction in our budget from year to year was tied to reduction in headcount. Basically, they didn't fund any of our positions that were unfilled. That is pretty much the reduction of that budget there. So makes sense. So again, my intent here, when I get the admin costs all finalized, is to then just, instead of including it within all of these little line items, I'm going to separate the aggregate cost of those positions we're still pursuing in one line item and call it, kind of like a specifically identified piece of the reserve. That still gives me a $37 million total in personnel. The next thing I wanted to bring up is these were the legal costs. I did have a discussion about doing the same thing with some legal costs there was a large increase in our budget related to Frost Brown Todd. And if I can get the right number in here, did I put the right number in here? That should be higher than that. I'm missing a number for some reason. Give me a second to find something. I think I may have misplaced the number. So I'll have to fix that, but let me go ahead and share this again. But what I was trying to do was the same thing with legal costs, but I wanted to bring that discussion to the members of this committee. If I recall, I think this was $1 million at one point, this line item here, and it's for increased activity into a specific case, etc. And we don't, again, legal costs are hard to predict, and we may not know if that's what we're going to spend. And so it was suggested that maybe we do the same thing that we were doing with personnel costs, is maybe allocate a specific amount in the legal category, but not specific to this particular firm, and then reduce that to similar to what it was last year, and then have this in here. I have had a discussion with legal since then. The legal costs that they've provided me, including this $1 million in this line item, are fairly accurate to what they anticipate spending based on the activity that's coming about. And so we don't know if this is the best way to do this, if it's necessary or unnecessary. If this committee and then subsequently the KPPA board approves these expenses by firm and in total, then we won't have to come back to the board once we, if we reduce this to 300,000 and kept 500,000 down here, we would have to come back to the board to move this out of the reserve, so to speak, up to this line item. And we didn't know if that was something we wanted to do based on the best estimates provided by legal to me. So let me leave that there and ask if there's some questions or clarifications needed on these costs.
Well, it seems that there is questions from K-Bud and others about using reserves rather than actual line item expected. And you all are the ones that deal with that, but it just seems to me that we raise not red flags, but yellow flags if we have large unallocated reserves as opposed to expected expenses. And if we miss on the expected expenses, we miss.
So my interpretation of what you just indicated there, it would be better to put this full reserve amount into a line item so that it does not raise a yellow flag, so to speak. And if we miss, we miss.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. I'm not sure
Yeah.
it's a great idea, but there's no easy idea because we just don't know what until the bills come in, until the hours are billed, we just don't know what it's going to be. And
Right. Oh, I'm sorry, Kurt.
I just think that, Michael has, done some work on these and has made a good Kentucky windage number. And I would just let that ride until we know differently.
Now, I certainly appreciate that thought, and I actually think it's a good thought and a good way to look at this. I just look at it slightly differently and say that if we go from a budget of last year where our unbudgeted or reserve number was around 4 million to we get to with totally allocating everything a excess budget of 50,000 to 75,000. I think to your point, Pruitt, that raises an equal yellow flag. I don't know that there's anything that we can do that's not going to raise a yellow flag. But I think by treating this very similarly to the way that we've treated personnel, we basically have said that yes, we understand that there is a probability, if not a likelihood, that the expenses are going to substantially increase, but we haven't totally removed ourselves from the oversight or the management of that, so that in the end, I hate to use the word justification, but in the end, the boards will be able to walk and manage through the requests that are being made. And I just think from an oversight perspective that that's probably a better way to go. And again, I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but I do think from an oversight perspective, that's maybe marginally better.
So Ed, let me make sure I understand. You would rather see something like 300 or 500,000 here, and then that difference spread over here. And that way there would be more oversight once we hit this number and we need to bring this out of the reserve into that number, it would go back before the boards to provide more oversight and scrutiny and clarity over that line item. Is that kind of what I'm getting
Correct.
here? And that's similar to what I don't know if that was this oversight and scrutiny was necessarily the thing for the personnel. I think the personnel line item was because we hadn't gotten the approval from the budget office for that yet. That's why that one was being requested to be separated. So it's very similar to personnel, but a little bit different reasoning is what I'm hearing here. Reasoning here is more for oversight and scrutiny maybe of those costs when it comes time.
If I may comment here, I just want to comment that I particularly in this arena, as you all are aware, what happens in a lot of legal matters is we will have things, we have matters that are pending before the court on various motions, on various briefing, on things of that nature. And then they sit there for, months upon months upon months with no activity. The court is not ruling on those matters for various reasons. And then there's no activity, there's no expenses going on, and that will pass a fiscal year. And so it looks as though we haven't spent a lot of money, or we didn't reach anywhere near our allocated amount. And then all of a sudden, the next fiscal year, the court will rule, and that unleashes a flurry of activity in that case. And just from my perspective of, just for, clarity here for this group of understanding that, if we were to reduce an amount here, and then there's a flurry of activity in a case, for any given reason, that one of these firms is representing us in, that takes us over an allocated amount, before we can get back before the board and request this money that we've left in this unallocated reserve line item be moved up there, that's going to make us over budget, and that maybe in that specific line item for that time frame. So just wanted to bring that to this group's light, that may be the other side of this, is that on a quarterly financial report, it may look like we're significantly over on a specific area when as a result of that.
Well, I think that's kind of what I was trying to come around to, Michael, and let's be mindful that these expenses, not all of them, some of the other legal, are under the KPPA, not the K and not the C plans, and for approval. And like you said, it could be simply a timing matter or a surprise, and then we have to go get approval to up it and pay it. I'd rather just leave it if we think best efforts, best judgment, that it's going to be significant, like it was previous year. I'd rather stick with that.
I think that if we were budgeting something close to what had been budgeted for the prior year, that probably makes sense. And even as we talked about in the investment budget with the consultants, they have a built-in escalator in their contract. If we wanted to say something that we budgeted this last year, we're going to give it an escalator effect so that we budget this, which is something less than what is being totally asked for. That too, I think, would be preferable to a carte blanche. Let's just budget it and essentially say from the boards and understanding the legal structure that we have here, but also understanding that the C Trust will pay 2/3 of that expense. It makes sense for there to be triggering events that simply put people on notice that there is additional activity taking place. And I don't think that anyone would say, oh, well, no, we're not going to fund that. It's simply a matter of people being made aware this is something that is happening. Our legal expenses are increasing here for these reasons, so that from an oversight perspective, they can acknowledge that that has in fact occurred.
Well, I'm gonna opine as the only member, and therefore the chairman of this, that this doesn't require a final decision today, and that when we do have a meeting with Mr. O'Meara present, we will discuss it and get to a final decision there.
Thank you. And noted, both great points on those costs for sure. The
Mike.
other item, yes, sir.
Mike, do you have any concerns about this, the way this discussion's going?
You know, I see both sides of it. I think it's not going to prevent the legal firm from billing us. It's not going to prevent the legal firm from getting paid because they get paid based on their contract amount that's in EMARS. This administrative budget and the presentation of it on a quarterly basis, Michael's right. We may be over. Let's say first quarter, there's a flurry of activity and we hit, $600,000 in expenses. We pay that, we would be over, and that would be presented in that first quarter's budget, but then we can move it. It's an additional step to move it with KPPA's approval. But it does add scrutiny and things. So I see both sides. I don't have an issue with either side, either. The next item I had on here was IT costs, and I was just able to meet with IT this morning. And my initial meeting with them a couple weeks ago was, here's their budget. They hadn't done much to it. I left, they had it still at 4.1, which is what they had last year. But they thought that they maybe could get it down to 3.5. So I originally put 3.5 million in this IT budget line item right here. This morning, after they'd gone through all their projects and what they anticipate finishing this year, what they look at last year, we met again this morning and it was 4.6 million. And I said, no, we got to do something here. So we spent an hour going through their projects, looking at items that they think they can get in this year, right? So there's they have a month left and they have a few things coming. And we also looked at what they have so they budget a lot of their stuff that go in other line items. So they, in their own IT budget, they budget their own travel, their own dues and subscriptions, this, that, and the other. So we took all of that out today and we looked at some of the projects that we think can get done before June 20th. And we looked at some of the projects that they have next year. And we talked about some of those projects. And right now I have a rough number of 4.1 again. And go ahead.
Mike, I'd be interested to see a 5, 6, 7 year history of budget versus actual, just in aggregate. Because I think it's always under budget by a substantial amount, which tells me there's something flawed in their methodology or the way they think about budgeting. But you can't be $1 million under every year, $1.5 million under year after year after year after year, if I'm right with my numbers.
And we tried to do that today, actually, because I asked that same question. I said, I'm going to get the question about, and also the budget office says we haven't spent all our money. A lot of that's tied to headcount, but if you're under $1 million in IT costs, then yes. And so it's not impossible to do that. It's a little more difficult because they do it by project, right? So they may say this project here, we're replacing servers and it got delayed a year. So maybe 200,000 was under budget that year because of that. So I have to kind of go look at the projects to do that, but it's something I definitely should do to give that analysis. What I was going to say is in that 4.1 million I have right there is $200,000 of strategic plan initiatives. So out of the strategic plan, they anticipate having to do this technical assessment where they're going to look at the life cycle of all of our computer systems, including the START system. The START system's fairly old.
Teresa Wilson.
It's maybe like 10, 15 years old and maybe needing replacement. So that they're going to pace, I think the strategic plan suggested looking at your IT future. And so to do some kind of assessment like that may cost a little bit of money with an outside firm coming in and look at that. So that was put in there with discussion with Rebecca and IT. So I want you to know out of that 4.1, that 200,000 is kind of new. Wasn't in the first meeting I had with IT. Maybe that's why they thought they could get to 3.5. So if you take that out, you're down to 3.9. But I don't want to take that out yet. And then there was 2 other projects that they don't think are going to get done this year and going to get moved to next year. that would have got us to 3.5. So I don't have the detail of those projects. In the next meeting, I want to again scrutinize the IT costs and give you a better view of what makes up 4.1 million, right? What is it exactly? Is it what kind of software, what kind of projects, what kind of badge system? I have that, but it's not in a presentable format for you. But I wanted to put that 4.1 million out there again, because that may be where it lands. And with that, including this 1.6 million of additional headcount people, we do get to the point where we don't have a lot of reserve left. We lost $1.5 million in the budget from last year. Our headcount's near cap. We have additional legal fees, keeping the IT budget, at 4.1, and the increased costs in other areas. We've exhausted this $4.8 million reserve. Which after our email conversation with the budget office may not be a bad thing, right? If we spend close to what we're allocated, that may encourage them to increase our headcount costs. But again, it doesn't leave a lot of room for surprises. Some people like the reserve. Some of the trustees that we've talked to don't. They'd rather not have any. So I just want to present currently how that admin budget looks with those IT costs and legal costs, and where we're going from there. Questions, comments, concerns on where we stand on the admin side?
I think, thank you for the, a little more detailed run through with the IT people, because, those, laymen like us, we don't understand all that, and it sounds like it was just, not a lot of thought put into the original number, and a little more thought would be positive.
Yeah, and they've done that, and but again, they also are very aggressive, and there's some of these IT projects are critical,
Yes.
and you definitely don't want to move them further down the line. So I will get the more detail of what makes up that 4.1 and the necessity of it for the next meeting for sure.
Thank you.
The other item under this was other admin costs. So again, them are still being finalized for the most part. They're not going to change a little bit. I think postage is going to go up. We do have some like a C election next year. Postage in general's gone up. So there's a few other line items in here. I think they're going to go up and down, and it should not have a large impact on the overall admin budget based on my discussion so far. The one piece that I haven't got to touch base with Rebecca on is the Louisville lease. And if we get a Louisville lease, I don't know what the rent would be for that. And there's going to be some additional costs to furnish it, is my understanding. So I don't have numbers for that, but those will be put into this hopefully by next week also.
Yeah, we're moving closer on that, and with three, I think Steve said there are 3 responses to that, and so that should be, I won't say finalized, but should be tied down a little bit in the next month or so.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
And Steve, on the 3 proposals you've seen, is there an ETA date to execute? Like, is it September, or do you know?
So we have four properties actually responded to the request for lease. We're visiting them, I believe, on June 3rd with Real Properties, Rebecca, Dave, and I. I don't know how quickly it moves as far as negotiating a lease with Real Properties. So I would expect 3 to 4 months would probably be realistic. Some of those are going to, for finalization of lease, and then the move-in is going to obviously depend on what needs to be done to the space as well. Dave might have more experience with that. He might be able to add additional color, but that would be my expectation, would be probably a 3 to 4 month period.
Dave, what I was mentioning is I don't have anticipated Louisville rent costs besides a small number of 56,000, which is carried over for many years. But with the new Louisville lease and the refurnishing of that, I don't have those admin costs in yet. and I don't know what they are. I need to get with Rebecca and see what the proposals are. But I was asking Steve, do they think they would be in September or December? What was your thought be before we get moving ready?
Yeah, I'm sorry, had to step away, had somebody come to the house to pick up something. Is the question the cost of the space or when it's gonna?
I still need to get that. I don't anticipate you having that, but in your experience, when would, say, the investment group be able to move in?
Yeah, what I don't know, they're gonna show us, we've got a date set, I think it's June 3rd. They're gonna show us 4 spaces. I don't know how much build out needs to be done, and whether it's set up such as, move in tomorrow if you want, or whether there's gonna be a lot of construction work. So I won't know that for a while.
Okay. Good to know. So I'll work something in there after I talk to Rebecca a little bit more about what the
Yeah.
pricing we see and what we may anticipate.
Yeah, I originally we were looking at like 20, maybe 23, $24 a foot, and we're getting 3,500 feet. But whether surcharges will go on top of that or build out charges, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you. The next part of the budget was just other admin investment topics, including training and budget policy. So as part of this group is going to be approve a training and a budget policy, which I'm supposed to put together. If those don't get done prior to the KPPA meeting that's scheduled on June 27th, I think we could still have this budget committee meet and approve them. So I want a policy that's in place that directs how the budget gets created and approved, which may eliminate the need for a budget work group, may not, but that policy is going to be written to kind of, put guardrails in place on how the budget should be developed by staff and the approval processes for that. And then obviously a training for the trustees. That's something that it's been on the list for a couple of years. And so I hope to have that done also so that it can, provide knowledge to everyone about how this process works. The next item is confirm the next meeting day. So this is kind of critical for me because the next one on June 6th, the real important part of that meeting will be we've already finalized the hybrid percentage and then how that hybrid percentage is going to get allocated to the C and the K plans. The June 6th meeting there's a C board meeting on the 10th and a K board meeting on the 18th. I want to take those hybrid percentages that you guys have approved and that we anticipate the KPPA board will approve on June 27th, and then we want the K and the C board ahead of time to approve their own internal allocations among the SPRS and the HAS and the non-HAS plans. So that meeting is going to be a final step for us to move that forward to those 2 boards, but we will also go through a final investment budget once those 2 numbers that Steve talked about today get adjusted. A really final, I think, admin budget for the most part. I want that kind of done, but there may be some things that linger from that June 6th meeting. And so the other meeting date that I had on my draft was June 20th. And that was because the next meeting, that gives us 7 days to get stuff to the KPPA board. So the June 20th meeting, the intent of that meeting would be to finalize everything. We've got the admin budget squared away. We're comfortable with it. The investment budget's comfortable. We have separation costs identified, and all of those things that the KPPA board needs to approve. That last meeting would give us the opportunity to approve anything for presentation to the KPPA board. One thing came up on June 20th already, and first, let's talk about June 6th. Make sure everyone's okay with June 6th. It's a Thursday at 10 a.m. It'll be a public meeting. I think
that's, we can start with that. I think it's been sent out previously, and if pending Mr. O'Mara's ability to join us, which I think would be critical there, we can take that to the next step of formally scheduling it.
perfect. Then the June 20th, there's Humana's coming on site to do their Compass Plan meeting. And that's going to occupy the boardroom from like 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. And so when I talked to Sherry yesterday, I think if we get a lot of stuff done next week on the 6th, that last meeting, again, is the intent is just to make final approvals and recommendations to the KPPA board. I think we could do it between 11 and 12 a.m. on that Thursday, the 20th in the boardroom. And there would be no conflicts with the boardroom, but I didn't know if, Mr. Lane had a conflict or Mr. Owens or Mr. Chilton.
I'm good.
No conflict for me.
Perfect. So still got a lot of work to do on the admin side with IT, and we can discuss the legal separation of that amount in the next meeting. I will confirm Steve's admin budget in the next meeting, investment budget in the next meeting, and go from there.
My one caveat on the investment budget is if on the index fee amount, S&P and Russell, the final approval potentially for C would be at their board meeting on the 10th. So if
Okay.
it need to be ratified, just in the IC would have already either recommended, approved it or not approved it. But if they did approve it, it would go to the board on the 10th for ratification.
So that's good. We can maybe carry this investment budget forward to the 20th also for final. So that'd be perfect. That's what I have.
All right, and the last item on the agenda is the ever popular adjournment, unless there are other matters that we need to attend to, and we don't need to take a vote here for adjournment, I don't believe, unless there's objection. Do I hear any objection to adjourning? Hearing none, it's not quite lunchtime, but everybody have a pleasant day, and we'll see you in a couple.